Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And you're back from Bologna.
I'm back from Bologna, where I've seen 35 films in 7 days, and it was marvellous.
Sounds exhausting.
It was also exhausting.
And there was a heat wave.
Yes, and the air conditioning wasn't working. You know, they had to give everyone fans at the door just to kind of get through it. But actually, there was something rather magical about that as well. You know, you're seeing these great films, and your whole body's sweating, and you're in like kind of this dreamscape watching black and white movies, and it was just heaven.
That was nice.
It was nice.
I stayed in bed.
And
yeah, no, that's it. I just stayed in bed. We've seen Spider-Man: Far From Home.
Yes.
Spoilers are going to be coming up. There's plot revelations and stuff that we just get straight into. So, spoilers. Everything is revealed.
Yes.
It's your choice. I mean, well, there's not a lot of choice at the minute, but I said, "What do you fancy?" And that's the one you picked.
It's the one I picked, and I really disliked it. Yeah.
Really?
Yes. So for the first half of the movie, I was just angry at it. Really. So, and it's a beef of mine. It's something, you know, that kind of people have probably heard before. But I just think there's something unethical about these films that, you know, destroy Venice, right? And in the middle of it, try to get some feeling going, you know, for the teenagers as all this destruction is happening. And, you know, and it's a bit of a joke, and they're far from home, and, you know, kind of you're meant to find something humorous. And you think, the Piazza San Marco is one of the great kind of icons of human civilization, right? And these American barbarians are just kind of trashing it, like without any thought on what kind of a response an audience might have from their doing just that. And they, you know, they do the same later with Tower Bridge, and they do the same with like Charles Bridge in Prague. And you think, you know, if this was the fucking Empire State Building, you know, and you just kind of trashed it, like, you know, you just wouldn't, actually. I mean, you know.
Wouldn't you?
No. Has that happened in a film that's not set in the future?
Well, they destroyed thingy, didn't they, in Independence Day? The White House. Lots of bits of America. I mean, I wasn't going to talk about like specific examples. I guess I can see what you're talking about, but it didn't strike me as something objectionable in this.
Well, I found it a kind of barbarism, actually, like, and very typical. You know, so I have this whole thing about, you know, just even in how American films, like in general, you know, that like you have to destroy like entire cities or buildings, or, you know, that kind of the effects that, I mean, you know, kind of my faucet kind of stops working and I have a breakdown for like, you know, 3 weeks, and here entire cities are razed and it doesn't matter. And actually, in a way, when they're anonymous, I certainly haven't responded to it as mattering very much. You know, but the fact that you are meant to see all of Venice razed, you know, whilst feeling sympathy for a few American students, you know, and also find humor in the situation, it just struck a chord with me, and I hate it.
You think you're meant to find humor in the situation? Where?
Yeah, well, there was something about Peter trying to hide what he was doing, you know, making sure that his friends were in constant hotel, or, you know, a lot of the things about they're on a barge, you know, but then the boat lands in a particular way. There are jokes inserted within the scene of destruction. And I just kind of found it in an appalling taste. I mean, I was just thinking, like, you know, Venice. Like, you know, yeah, how beautiful it is, how it's lasted for 1,000 years, you know, kind of how it is, you know, one of the most beautiful cities on earth, if not, you know, the most beautiful. And here it's just like these fucking, like, barbarians kind of, you know, kind of playing with one of the great World Heritage sites and destroying it as if it means nothing. You know, and then actually I thought, oh, maybe, you know, so maybe subsequently you think, oh, well, you know, this is an illusion, right? But actually, the illusion is the monster. The effects of the destruction is meant to be real.
The destruction is real.
Yeah. So that just set me off on a mood, basically.
Okay.
I hate that.
That's a shame. Yeah, I must say, it didn't strike me that way. I noticed the destruction obviously right at the start. The film opens with a scene of destruction, and then these things come out. It's this idea of these fighting these elemental monsters, and causes these great destructions. So, as you say, Venice, then Prague, then London happens in, and it kind of occurred to me because obviously we've been talking about it recently. We spoke about it in Godzilla, where the difference the difference is here. You're talking about a kind of a notable site and a site of kind of cultural importance and kind of icon of civilization. In Mexico, in Godzilla 2, we were talking about the kind of attitude to destroying a culture and a people that is not that. There was a kind of difference there. That's why I found that objectionable, which I didn't hear. I think I really enjoyed the film. I had a really good time. I think the film really captures something that is really great about Spider-Man. The idea of him being a kid, and the conflict between his responsibility and who he would otherwise be were he not imbued with these powers, and the fact that then he kind of feels like he has to use them. He constantly has to keep his classmates safe.
I get
and the film.
I get that that's what the film is trying to do, and obviously it succeeded with you. But I just think it's kind of a tactlessness or a tone deafness or a lack of caring for the world, where it's clearly that you're meant to sympathize with these American teenagers, and Peter Parker Spider-Man is just a kid, so you are being kind of shown the kinds of conflicts and sexual things that matter to kids. But actually you are being shown it in the context of these World Heritage Sites whose destructions don't matter a jot to this film. And that made me really angry.
Okay. Did you lighten up later?
Well, I think by that point, really, to be honest, like the film had lost me, right? Because then you begin to notice other things, right? So, on the one hand, the film is making a serious argument, or trying to make a serious argument about how easily manipulated we are, kind of, the construction of ideas, the construction, simulation, and distribution of lies, kind of, images that are meant to represent something, but that are a construct, and how that then affects our actions and the way we understand and shape reality. I mean, the film is trying to do all of that, but my thinking is, well, why should I pay any fucking attention to what you're doing when you're discussing like three of the major achievements and centers of Western civilization as if they don't matter, right? Like, all the art and beauty and history of Venice, and Prague and London, if that doesn't matter a fuck to you, why should I fucking care about like your stupid illusion, or like kind of you are contributing, right, to this idea that all of these huge achievements of knowledge and culture and politics don't matter. So kind of now you're saying, well, we live in a world where ideas are constructed out of lies and so on. Well, my feeling is this film is part of that problem. So fuck you, Spider-Man.
Okay.
I'll give you a space to recover for that, so then we can talk about, kind of how good Tom Holland is.
No,
it
just didn't strike me that way. It didn't strike me as any more egregious than any number of other disaster movies you could name, for instance.
I think the thing about other disaster movies is that I suppose they anonymize certain things. I mean, I've always found it a problem that in recent times, that this happens to the world and you're not meant to care. But I do think, if it happens in kind of some anonymous city, or the jungle, or at sea, or, in the desert, like, yeah. But for me, it's like, this was Venice, right? Like, and that's what it started with. And you're not meant to care. Yeah, kind of what you're meant to focus on is on the destruction, on the spectacle, on, kind of towers not hitting people or something, rather than actually the destruction of these beautiful buildings.
Yeah, it's
themselves.
the people who are vulnerable that you're meant to care about, rather than the buildings coming down.
Uh-huh.
But
Which in
I
a
mean, to be
normal
fair, I felt the same way about Notre Dame when it burned down the other week. I didn't care, and actually, I didn't really understand why people did. It's a building.
Well, I did care because it's not just a building. I mean, I thought people's response to it was ludicrous.
Yeah.
But I mean, actually, that's a wonderful example, right? So you saw how people felt about Notre Dame, right? And it's one building. And here, like, 60 Venice landmarks are just kind of destroyed within 5 shots and you're not meant to care at all. And I do think that it's a kind of a stupidity and tactlessness on the part of the filmmakers. Because for most Americans, they won't care. They won't know what Venice represents. But actually, in a lot of places, they will know and care about what, Venice represents or what Tower Bridge represents. Yeah, or what the Charles Street Bridge represents in Prague. And actually, it's kind of obscene to see them being treated like that.
Should we talk about different things now?
Yes, I think we better change the subject.
Because like I said, I really, really enjoyed the film, and I think we brought up a little bit the villain, and I think it's one of the most interesting villains that these films have had. We had the sort of the aliens in Captain Marvel that turned out to be actually kind of refugees, and like you were looking at them kind of entirely the wrong way, which was really interesting. But this villain is along the lines of the Mandarin from Iron Man 3, or even like Jonathan Pryce's character in Tomorrow Never Dies, in that he is not a kind of straight up villain; he's faking a villain. And there's something really interesting. There's something really people really like it. I think when big popular movies like these go meta, which is what this is doing, because it's so the character is Jake Gyllenhaal, is part of S.H.I.E.L.D., or he's working with S.H.I.E.L.D., and he's this kind of alien in a suit from. Well, he's not an alien. He's from an alternate dimension, Earth. Right, we are Earth 616, and he's from Earth 833, and these elemental beasts, as in wind, water, fire, and air, have destroyed his planet, and now they're coming here. So he's like, I'm going to help you out. They took my family and so on and so forth, and I'm going to help you end them. And then what is revealed is he's faking it. He's from regular Earth. There's no multiverse going on. He's from our Earth, and he used to work for Tony Stark. And Tony Stark kind of took some of his technology that he made and gave it a insulting acronym, BARF. And said this is just a load of rubbish.
And that hurt his feelings forever.
Basically, hurt his feelings so much that he decided, I'm going to take over the world. Like, but his motivation is very clear, and his methods are very clear. His ultimate goal is not so clear. Like, what he intends to do ultimately, control the world through misinformation, is really vague. But the first two parts are interesting, and they're quite concrete. So what he does is he uses a lot of different technologies that he's kind of come up with, holographic technologies and drones and things like this, to create basically CGI battles in the real world, right? So this battle that happens with the battle that happens that destroys Venice with the fire demon, or actually it's in Prague with the fire demon. The destruction is real because he's using drones to destroy stuff, but the visuals, the actual look of a giant beast fighting a man in a cape, is not real. That's fake.
Yes.
Presented for the people to believe, which is kind of interesting because what is revealed he's actually doing is standing around in a motion capture suit.
Yes.
Kind of like looking at the action through a PDA basically, and controlling it from afar. And the film does this stuff where it's like its own behind the scenes thing, right? It's like, this is how these movies are kind of made. Like, people are just standing around in motion capture suits, and all the suits and stuff that they are supposed to be wearing are all CGI. The film kind of says, okay, now one step more, we'll have the character literally do that.
And I think it's meant to tell you metaphorically, and this actually is the way that ideas and news and history is being designed, imagined, constructed, disseminated, right? Like, I do think you are meant to see like a kind of a connection between, what is happening in the film and the world we live in of fake news and so on.
Exactly. There's a real relationship to fake news, but I mean, like I say, going back to 1995, was it Tomorrow Never Dies? It's incredibly similar to that, where it was Jonathan Pryce's character was a kind of Rupert Murdoch sort of analogue, who was in charge of a news corporation that would create wars I can't remember exactly what he did, but he's basically creating news.
Let's not focus too much on plot, right? Because there's...
Well, I'm not talking about plot. I want to get into kind of what it's saying, because you're right, it talks about kind of, you said a kind of relationship to fake news. The idea of kind of, can we believe what we're shown, and the way in which we're shown things. So right at the very, very end is a really interesting example of it, where Spider-Man has defeated Jake Gyllenhaal, but some video that Jake Gyllenhaal has kind of leaked just before his death to the world seems to show Spider-Man being the villain, and we've seen it happen, and the way that it's been kind of edited and cropped, basically, tells a completely different story.
That's right.
That's going to put Spider-Man in peril in the next movie.
Yes.
You know, because everyone knows his identity now, and everyone thinks that he, you know, like the end of the Dark Knight, everyone thinks that he's the bad guy.
Yes.
Which I think is really interesting, and there's this fantastic segment where all the sort of drone and holograph technology is brought to bear on Spider-Man to make him completely unsure of where he is. This kind of hallucination sequence, which is visually absolutely dazzling, and it plays with that trope of, he's made to be completely unsure where he is. The world is changing all around him. He can't believe anything that he's seeing or experiencing, and then he's back in the real world, and he gives up information. And it's then revealed he's still in the fake world. You know?
Yeah, I didn't think that was all that dazzling. Actually,
really?
I thought
I loved that.
Well, I thought it was kind of like an experimental montage that wasn't, that was a bit clunky and not handled with much grace.
It could have been better edited.
It could have been much better
edited. But still, I think it was visually really, really striking.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, the only thing that I really loved about it, that I think is really worth praising, is Tom Holland's performance. Because I think, without him, the film would just be like complete crap. Because I do think it's tone deaf, the film. And I think what Tom Holland does is he brings kind of a sweetness and a humanity, and he seems kind of real at every moment, really. I think kind of it's quite an astonishing performance, really. And not matched by anybody else, really.
Oh, I don't agree with that.
Oh, I do.
Really?
Yes. I mean, I think Samuel Jackson is given the excuse, because, I mean, this is spoilers now, but, he's given the excuse that... So his performance is quite damped down and unexciting and so on, and then at the end you're told, oh, well, he's a Skrull, right? Kind of disguised or masquerading as Nick Fury. But really, it was a kind of a bit of a trial to watch that. And then kind of, there's a nice interplay between Peter Parker and his best friend. That was very sweet. There's kind of like a few good jokes between the best friend and his girlfriend, but, that's almost like sitcom-y kind of comedy, really.
What's wrong with that? I mean, what's wrong with that? The relationship that I really like.
Well, let me tell you what's wrong with that. Yeah. Because kind of what's wrong with that is that it's a cheap joke. So it doesn't actually tell you very much about kind of human relations or relations amongst people, or kind of it is just like a kind of a sitcom joke. It's kind of a line that you're kind of meant to find funny because it has a little bit of a twist to what a situation's supposed to be like.
Well, I don't think it's about that. It's the development of their relationship. It's not entirely unpredictable,
It's entirely predictable.
Yeah, the best friends thing is we're going to Europe. Let's be single and let's have a lad's holiday type of thing. Immediately ends up in a relationship with a girl he sits next to on the plane, and then they kind of develop this really adult relationship, really loving sort of kind of as if they've been a long-term relationship for years, sort of thing. And then they break up by the end, and it's like, oh, we've grown apart. It's funny and lovely, and they play it really nicely. And what do you expect? When you say, oh, it doesn't tell you anything about the human condition, are you expecting that?
I'm telling, yes, well, in a better film you would. That's my point.
No.
So yes, you are finding it sweet and funny, and, and it works. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but it works on a very low level.
So what? It was really nice and funny and sweet, and and unobjectionable. It wasn't like they were destroying Venice.
Very low expectations. I mean, I think, so let's be clear. I agree. That was one of the enjoyable aspects of the film, and I liked it very much. And it was enjoyable to see. But it's very low expectations.
What about Zendaya, who plays MJ?
Oh, I like her very much.
Yeah, that to me, that relationship between the two of them and how it develops is absolutely wonderful. And when it culminates in that kiss at the end, You know, it's a beautiful scene. It's really sweet. You really feel that kind of childhood glee about it. You know, this isn't like two 20. I mean, they are 20-somethings in real life, but this isn't played off as two 20-somethings who are meeting up and hooking up. These are 16-year-olds who are finding love for the first time, and it's incredibly sweet and beautiful. And then Peter Parker skips off at the end. You feel the lightness in his heart. Absolutely wonderful. Mm-hmm. You know, and I love the fact as well that the film makes MJ smart. Like she was smart in the previous film, and she is a smart character. But it really the moment the film started, I thought, if she's not going to work out his identity, I'm not with it, because she's too smart not to. It's too obvious, and the film starts to make overtures towards that. And by the halfway point, she has figured it out. And like, thank you for having the kind of the confidence to do that, I suppose, with the character. You know, as opposed to it being this constant secret.
Listen. Let's not go overboard on this, right? Because
you're just in a bad mood because you didn't like they destroyed some paintings.
Well, maybe I am in a bad mood, but you know, kind of what you're saying here about Mary Jane. There's like 3 female characters in the film of any significance. You know, one is Auntie M, who Marisa Tomei is very attractive playing, and actually she's wonderful. She does get all the laughs and so on. You know, but now Auntie M, as opposed to like Aunt May.
Auntie M's from Wizard of Oz.
Sorry. So as opposed to Sally Field, Aunt May here, she's kind of girly, flirty. Yeah, it's kind of it's a very traditional and cliched type of femininity that's on display. The young girl who is the girlfriend of Peter Parker's best friend is the same. Right, kind of like, cliched, character. And then there's Mary Jane, so kind of, and all structurally kind of given very little time in relation to any of the other male characters. So, if you didn't make Mary Jane smart, my God, it would be like horrific, right? Like the least you could do is make, this love interest who nevertheless is given a very small, role in the action, make her smart. You have to see also what Peter Parker sees in her.
Well, I wasn't thinking about it from a feminist perspective. I was thinking about it in a kind of believability of the film, Yes. Like the film started. I mean, we talked about previously. We have previously talked about how these 2 new Spider-Man ones, the last one, Homecoming, did away with some of the kind of, you would think, canonical elements of Spider-Man, like Uncle Ben dying. Didn't have that at all.
Yes.
Kind of made you think of what is essential to it, because it still works really well. And I think the choices that it's making, one of the things about Spider-Man was the whole thing was no one ever knew his secret identity. That's a kind of that's your very traditional superhero thing, which started to get turned on its head even at the start of the Marvel series. With at the end of Iron Man, he goes, "I'm Iron Man," becomes a celebrity. So in this, it's making a very big decision to have several people know about his identity now. He opens up to MJ, which is a big difference. But I like the fact they went ahead with that because it makes sense in this context.
Yeah, those are some of the nicer things of the film. I mean, I think there's no question about it. And actually, isn't it also a problem that what you remember out of this $200 million film or whatever is like a few lines between the characters, and well, I do think Tom Holland is wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I think I dread to think what the film would have been without him, really. So I think he's really special, and I mean, to me, he's the best Spider-Man so far. But this is far from being the best Spider-Man movie. I really love the Sam Raimi ones.
They are really good. One of the other things I liked about this is, which I was vaguely alluded to earlier on, is that it keeps his classmates in constant contact with him. I think what other films have done, what other Spider-Man stories have done, is they have this central idea of with great power comes great responsibility, and the conflict between the responsibility that he has just from having this power, and the life that is being kind of taken from him because he has this responsibility, the life of a child, and being able to kind of grow up innocent and all that sort of stuff. And what other films have done is kind of separate those, because he has, on the one hand, he has the story where he's trying to be a kid at school, and on the other hand, you have, I'm trying to save the world from a supervillain. And I like the way that this keeps everything in constant contact, because the kids are always there. They're setting it as a school trip through Europe, where the villain is kind of following him around and therefore following the children around, works really well because there's a point right at the end where just after they've won in London, and MJ runs up and embraces him, and he says, "Are you okay?" And he says, "Is everyone else okay?" I really like that line. Like he's constantly have to be vigilant to all his friends. It feels way more holistic thematically in a way that other films have kind of separated those elements. You know, and I think it really communicates something essential about the idea of Spider-Man, the youthfulness to everything. And Tom Holland plays that really, really well, as you say.
Yeah, but I'm also not sure. So, for example, the whole sequence on the bus where he gets the glasses and, you know, and so on, and, you know, he puts everyone in danger, you know, because he wants to find out, or he wants to stop a revealing kind of image of being circulated. I thought, what an asshole, like, for the character, right? Like, you know, he is really endangering everybody, right, by kind of not being attentive to, you know, a larger thing that's at stake. So
accidentally, I didn't think that scene was perfect. I think it relies too much on contrived misunderstandings.
That's
you
right.
know, when the glasses say to him, "Is this kid Brett a target?" and he says yes, like he should know better.
Yeah.
You know, or the glasses should say, "Are you sure he's a human being?"
Yeah.
You know, so it relies too much on that. But it's not kind of. I mean, there's nothing like malicious to it. He's not being an asshole.
I thought it was no, but what he's doing is he's just thinking of himself and his friend rather than being intelligent about, you know, what's at stake and being in a bus in the middle of the Alps, you know, and calling on that. So I thought that was a very.
Well, he doesn't realise the power that he has in his hands at that point. That's what teaches him. Then the drone comes down. He's like,
I know,
shit.
but you know, the thing about Peter Parker also is he is meant to be a whiz.
Because that's why he then passes on the glasses to the baddie. He says, "This responsibility is too much for me. This shouldn't be for me. This should be for you."
I know. So you know, there's a whole series of kind of contrivances throughout the film that really do come across as contrivances, really. So and that is one of them. Yeah, like they have to figure out a way of kind of passing this on to Mysterioso. So, but I
Mysterio.
did.
Yeah, no,
Mysterio.
I mean he should be smarter. You're right, but I think it's still within its own context makes a certain amount of sense. The progression, like you say, makes a certain amount of sense.
The only thing that I really loved, aside from Tom Holland's performance, was at the end where he's going through New York, right, and
Right at the end when he's flying.
yeah,
swinging.
when he, you know, and all of those sequences where he's going through rooftop gardens and, you know, kind of stepping on kind of main buildings and all of that, I thought was lovely. You know, but imagine if they treated all of those like New York landmarks the way they treated Venice.
And, and J. Jonah Jameson's coming back.
I love that.
Well, particularly J.K. Simmons as
I
J.
love.
Jonah Jameson.
I mean, as
from
soon
the
as he
Raimi
came
movies.
on, it energized the whole thing.
He's
you know?
like one of the most wonderful things about the Sam Raimi series. And what's really great is he's going to take on, as he does in the Spider-Man video game that came out last year as well on PlayStation, which wasn't voiced by him, it was voiced by someone else. But the character of J. Jonah Jameson in that takes on a kind of Alex Jones type. You know, Alex Jones, the conspiracy theorist in America, the InfoWars guy. He takes on that kind of role. So J. Jonah Jameson was always kind of, at least in the Sam Raimi films, he was just printing whatever made him money basically. And like if it was against Spider-Man, then it was conflict and it was great. So let's just print it, makes it money. And then in the game, and what's being kind of promised here is more of a kind of conspiracy theorist angle, I think. Of a kind of promoting fake news, as it were, and a kind of constant sort of enemy type, kind of like a shock jock almost type thing, which I think is going to be interesting.
I mean, so there are two things maybe that have also kind of framed my response to this Spider-Man film. So the first is there's this wonderful interview with oh my god, the writer of Less Than Zero, and he also did that film with Christian Bale as the serial killer. Less Than Zero is the novel.
Bret Easton Ellis.
Yeah. So Bret Easton Ellis, there's an interview with him online where he says, kind of like, like the Marvel films are like kind of very good corporate filmmaking. It's kind of a wonderful model of business. and so on. But really, yeah, like kind of none of them are great films, and I happen to think that that's true, right? So in a way, kind of, that has framed a certain response of the Spider-Man film with me. The other thing was just kind of being at Bologna, right, and just kind of seeing, all these films that were absolutely like magnificent, and that make you think, and striking imagery, and that resonate, and that kind of make you think about the world and people, right? And by any of those, like this film is just like a trifle, really, and actually I think a trifle that has a veneer of kind of trying to make a critique of the culture that we live in, and our notions of truth and representation, our ideas of circulate. But really, it's kind of so uninformed and inconsistent, and lacking in just kind of beauty and understanding, that I think, why are we being so tolerant of, why are we spending so much time discussing what is really just a minor piece of trash, and we're only doing it because it's Marvel?
What
Right?
were your expectations?
So one of the things that Bret Easton Ellis said, well, kind of this is commercial cinema and it's a great model for making money. But actually, American cinema, American popular cinema has always been about making money. Yeah, the thing is that, some of those films, aside from being designed to make money, have also been great works of art, right? So, and you're not looking at it because it's Hollywood cinema, you're looking at it because Hollywood cinema has produced kind of great works of art. Very significant and influential around the world. So, now, these films are commercial films, they're very successful and, good for the Marvel Corporation or whatever, right? But if they're not giving you enough food for thought, or, arousing a feeling, or all of those things that kind of art is supposed to do, then really, kind of who cares if Marvel is making a lot of money?
That's not what I asked. What were your expectations?
Well, my
Seems
expectations...
like you expected...
my expectation with every film is that it'd be a great film. Isn't yours?
No, there's a difference between hope and expectation.
Really, I do expect these films to be great. Like kind of... Why shouldn't they be? Kind of... Yeah?
Because most films aren't.
Well, it's true that most films aren't, but it's also rather shocking. How many Marvel films have there been now?
25-ish.
Okay. It's really kind of shocking that out of the 25, there isn't one truly great one.
I don't think it's shocking.
I think it's shocking.
Shocking in what sense?
Well,
it's not a surprise.
I would have expected at least, 1 in 25 would be great. Yeah, why not? All that money, all that thinking, all those people working for years on making something great.
No, that's not how it works.
Well, I think that is that. I mean, I do think if you ask people, they are trying to make something
I think great requires risks. And where's commercial cinema ever going to take a risk? The closest it got was Black Panther.
Well, I mean, I don't think everything is about risk. So, anyway, kind of, yeah, I mean, I think, kind of, I'm very open-minded about cinema, and great cinema can take on all kinds of shapes and forms and so on. And there's no reason why a Marvel film can't be truly great. But also, it just hasn't been. So, and certainly this one is like, not worth spending an hour talking about it, that's for sure.
To you, I really liked it. And I think it is really interesting. I think, within a certain context, I'm not comparing it to anything you saw in Bologna.
Right.
I'm bringing to it the kind of expectation, the level of expectations of it. It's a Marvel movie, and it is huge commercial cinema and that sort of thing. And I think within that, it was really interesting. Like I say, I think the kind of the construction of the villain and the kind of meta stuff it does around it, kind of making him a director of his own villainy and an image creator. Like it's a wonderful thing where when it's first revealed to you, when he gets the glasses off Peter, and then he turns around and everyone who's been in this bar turns out to be in on it with him. One of his kind of co-workers, co-evil conspirators. He does this kind of speech saying, "Okay, thank you and thank you and thank you," and it's like the Oscars, thank you. You're the one who did the visual effects and you did the sound design and you did the plot. That's kind of and he's the director of it all and the star, which is kind of interesting. And I'd say it made me think as well about Saving Mr. Banks, which I happened to watch last night. Which is, have you seen?
I have seen it.
It's the story of the making of Mary Poppins. And that's a really interesting kind of meta thing as well. Like, and this actually is Disney as well because it's Marvel. Disney goes meta a lot, and it kind of invented all these tropes of kind of fairy tale filmmaking and stuff, fairy tale storytelling in visual media, and then started to kind of invert them itself with like Enchanted, the Amy Adams thing, where it was like, this is what you believe all these tropes are of being a fairy princess, and now look at them clash with actually what the real world is, sort of thing. And in Saving Mr. Banks, it's about the fear of Disneyfication, It's about sort of P.L. Travers going, I don't want to sell the story to Disney. Disney's been on at me for 20 years about getting this story off me, and I don't want to do it because he'll turn it into cartoons, all this stuff. And all of the stuff in it is about her, is about the clashes between what her story's meant to be and what they want to turn it into, and this sort of thing. But along with it being a story about Disneyfication, it is itself a Disneyfied movie.
Sure.
It softens the edges of P.L. Travers. She was a lot harsher than she comes. I mean, she was. If you listen to those tapes that she took when they were working on the adaptation, she's incredibly harsh, and she's slightly softened in this. Obviously, Disney himself is really softened. There's that whole thing in the film about how he walks around and makes everyone call him Walt. And you don't see him smoking and all that sort of stuff.
Well, but that's
and that again, it kind of reminded me of this. But it's a film about its own filmmaking in a way, or related to its own.
But
filmmaking.
It's a film that doesn't question its corporate dimension at all, right? I mean, this is a film that, well, first of all, I despised all of that Tony Stark thing. You say it's a joke, but it kept going on and on.
No, it didn't.
Oh, yes, it did.
No,
I despised it.
I disagree with you.
So, it's kind of like self-glorifying.
I think it was in context. It was at the end of Endgame when they did all the "Oh, you're amazing" credits. That was for the audience, and that was sickening. In this, it's part of the context of the story and the world.
It's a particular point of view on the context of the story and the world, and it's one that's self-glorifying, and I despise it. And second of all, there's no questioning ever, the kind of corporate culture is in any way exploitative or wrong. So like, kind of, everybody's enthralled to Tony Stark. Everybody's enthralled to the wonders, that these corporations have access to. There's never a moment, and this is very unlike, like if you imagine this film being done in the 30s, there would have been some counterpoint between what's happening with Peter Parker in space and so on, and what's happening with like poor Joe Blow who's losing his house and will not have food for another 30 days or whatever. This is completely in the realm of a corporate culture, that you're meant to admire because it's so rich and wealthy and omnipotent, right? And kind of not a single kind of touchstone to anybody who suffers from what is happening in the world that we are being shown is exploding.
Well, that's true. I mean, you don't see anything like that, but it's still when what's his name, when Peter Parker gets those glasses for the first time and almost kills his school friend, there is an undertone in that scene of how powerful this is, and that it is kind of wrong, that it is scary how much power it is, that he can look at everyone's texts. Yes. And it has to decide, no, I'm not going to do it. Again, like that bit in The Dark Knight where they're able to tap into everyone's phones to locate the Joker, and he's like, this cannot, you've got Morgan Freeman going, this is wrong, that sort of thing. So it has a kind of, you might call it lip service. I'm not saying it's like it's not about that, but it is there, and I think, and so while the film isn't critical exactly of itself, when it's kind of indulging in this sort of self-referential stuff, it's still it's still thoughtful about it. You know, it's still, like I say, these
Well,
questions about the images that we're creating.
It's thoughtful within the perspective of, you know, a consciousness that isn't very highly educated or indeed very thoughtful, right? So I think there are slippages now in this whole series of Spider-Man that I find kind of concerning. So, you know, one of the things about Spider-Man always is that he was very poor, right? And he always had to work part-time, and, you know, part of his working at the Daily Mail was because he was poor. And Aunt May, you know, she was a poor little old lady, and, you know, and kind of Peter needed to help out, right? So that's the whole point about Aunt May.
Aunt May. Just call Marissa Tomei.
Is you know, that she's very loving, but also very fragile and vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in this one, I mean, she's suddenly developed into sexy Marissa Tomei, who's having an affair with multimillionaire, what's his name, the director? Jon Favreau, you know, who's kind of flying his own corporate airplane, like, all over the world. I mean,
I'm with you on that.
That is a shift, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are elements of that I think are missing and are being smoothed out and kind of made sort of more comfortable.
Yes, and they're not innocent. They're
less,
kind of, you know, I mean,
it reminds me rather of that Love, Simon, the gay teen movie, where one thing that we mentioned about it was that it's a really affluent sort of world they live in, and the kid has no other problems other than being gay, which in a sense allows the film to only concentrate on this one aspect of the story, but on the other hand you don't believe sort of elements of it, and I think that kind of is working in a similar way here, you know, well, as you described, like what are Peter Parker's problems here? It's making a connection with people, and working out kind of what kind of life he can or should lead, and what his responsibilities are. But there are elements of his story that are not present, that have been previously, that add to that conflict to make it deeper. Well, that are being smoothed out.
I think there are elements of the story that have, you know, disappeared in such a way that make the film entirely uncritical of the corporate culture that kind of has a global sway. And I find that disconcerting. You know, because the whole thing about Peter Parker also is, you know, he's meant to be like of and for the people. And what of and for the people kind of now has really shifted quite considerably.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
I mean, who gets to go in an America, or indeed a Western world, where, you know, you have working people who are food hungry, yeah, like, you know, where's this all the class goes to Europe, you know, I mean, that would make sense in a Tony Stark film, but in a Spider-Man film, Spider-Man isn't meant to be one of those kids that their school organizes a trip to Europe.
No, I mean, you're right. I think that is an issue with them, and yeah.
Okay, I don't want to shit on your good time.
Look, you can't ruin my good time. I had a really good time, and fuck you. And actually, the fact that you didn't like it makes me like it more.
Well, good for you.
You know, so stuff you. But you're right about, certainly about that. I think, I mean, you know, that is definitely an issue, and it's something that, you know, the film tries to play this sort of this thing of Peter being forced into a bigger fight than he wants, which it also had with the Infinity War thing, where, you know, he joins the fight in space because he says if there's no neighborhood, how can you have a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man? Kind of forces him into this bigger story, and that's part of the kind of ongoing thing of these stories just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and stupider and stupider and stupider.
That's
so at
right.
the start of
this is the Kardashian Peter Parker movie, you know, because when he was going on whining, oh, you know, I'm in Europe, like, you know, do I need to save the world when I'm in Europe? And I think, oh, fuck off, schmuck. Like, you know, kind of most people your age are worried about whether they're going to get a summer job to pay for their tuition at kind of community college, right? So, you know, like, kind of you not getting what you want, you know, in Europe, right? Like, fuck you, was my thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be nice to see a socialist one next time, wouldn't it? What was some social
Fuck you
conscience
as well.
No, I'm fucking serious about it. I mean that, to be honest. I think that would be much more interesting. One that. But then there would be. At least in a sense, this is kind of honest about how little it cares about people.
Well,
imagine the lip service if it was like, and now it's going to be Spider-Man saves the neighborhood again.
Well,
after he's been to space.
I don't want to politically correct Spider-Man either. But, is there a single image that you remember from the film? I mean, is there an image that you think, wow,
Well, there was this. I remember the sequence of the hallucination, for instance. Whether there was an image, I think the image right at the end of Spider-Man grabbing Mysterio's gun as the kind of fake Mysterio is sitting on the floor. There's a composition there, which is great, and I really liked. And I mean, I if you're talking about like a single kind of composition like that, then apart from that, I probably can't think of one. But nonetheless, I think it is beautiful to look at. I think.
Yes, I wouldn't say so.
Maybe beautiful is not the right word, but visually dazzling. Certainly that hallucination scene. It brought me back to to some of the stuff in Doctor Strange, or kind of Scarecrow in Batman sort of thing.
No, see, I think this film had nothing. You know that, like those sequences in Doctor Strange where the world seems to dissolve or turn upside down.
Yeah.
I thought those were fabulous, right? And there was a real kind of visual nous about how those were presented.
Yeah,
and a kind of a logic.
Yeah.
So there was nothing in this film near.
No, there wasn't anything near that. And the director is probably not much of a director, really. I mean, visually.
Yes.
He also directed the last one,
yes.
which again was like a perfectly fine movie that I really enjoyed. But is there a shot you remember? It's nothing. I mean, even the Amazing Spider-Man movies, which are the not hugely well regarded, I suppose, Andrew Garfield ones, had those wonderful swinging sequences where everything lined up in wonderful. The city, and this didn't have anything like that. Even the swinging that you talk about right at the end, was. I didn't think that.
Well, it had been done before in the Garfield one,
but I think it looked better as well.
Yes. Anyway,
it's
so I don't want to discourage anyone from seeing it. I really didn't have a good time. I think maybe it's just I'm in a bad mood. But those things about
there certainly
Venice,
seems to have been. I was going to say, there certainly seems to be a thing of like you just come back from this cultural sort of trip to Bologna, having seen any number of wonderful classics.
No, it's not just that. But let me tell you what it is about. So, for example, one of the filmmakers I discovered was Youssef Chahine, right? Okay. This Egyptian filmmaker who's just wonderful. But one of the things that I noticed was when watching his films is that in each composition, he's got about 40 or 50 people. Like, he never frames, or he very rarely frames, a composition with one person on it, right? Like, kind of, there's always like kind of dozens of people in the frame. His films are social films. Like the fact that you have so many people in the frame reveals something about that culture and that society, right? Kind of in formal terms, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of, so so you come back and you try to think, well, what does this, Spider-Man reveal? And also I've been really appalled with all the Super Bowl concert stages where what is meant to be a joyous dance sequence ends up being an exercise in kind of military precision, and it's all so militarized and weaponized, and it speaks of a barbaric culture. And so maybe I have been seeing this film through those eyes, but actually I think seeing it through those eyes, there is a payoff to that. You do see that, right? But how could you contemplate kind of destroying Venice and then kind of trying to place jokes within that? I mean, it's just fucking like tactless, offensive, insulting, ignorant, and I don't doubt that the majority of the audience won't get that or feel for that or whatever, but I claim it's there.
Yeah. I mean, and if it is, I just think you kind of need to be more consistent with your outrage and take offence at every film that's done that.
Well,
this is the first time I've heard that.
This is what I have you for. You can call me on that next time. But kind of I did. Kind of.
Fair enough.
It could also be that I haven't noticed it at previous times or whatever. But that you could destroy Venice kind of, and crack jokes within that, I kind of find it a
I'm
problem.
sure Venice has been destroyed in a film before. I mean, it's such an obvious target. It's an empire built on sand, that place.
Well,
Or, water.
I've not, you've seen shootouts in Bond films in Venice, and you've seen action sequences in, what's the Michael Caine film with the cars?
Italian Job.
Yeah, The Italian Job. Lots of crime takes place in Venice, but I haven't seen Venice destroyed kind of senselessly whilst jokes are cracked. In between, it's kind of appalling.
I think the jokes might be overdoing it. It didn't feel like it wasn't a jokey fight scene. I don't think there were that many jokes in it. I think that's slightly over. Well, that's not overdoing it, but I think it's slightly misrepresenting what the fight scenes were. They weren't.
My whole point is that the filmmakers didn't think about it. Yeah, but actually that they didn't think about it is a problem for me.
Maybe they thought this is great. It's the perfect way to annoy Jose.
Well,
and they were right.
Well, they certainly were right about it having annoyed me. But I would be interested to see whether, how that plays out. And I'd be kind of, I would be surprised if it doesn't annoy other people. I mean, in the context that we live in at the moment. But I also think that would be an interesting difference to see the reception of all of that in Europe, in America, and then in places like China, where, something like, Venice would not necessarily signify as much.
Let me see if Venice has been destroyed. Let's see if I can find anything. That'll be interesting. Venice destroyed. Venice is being destroyed by tourists, apparently.
Well, that's true.
No, I don't know. I won't find anything on it, I'm sure. Yeah. Don't know. It's an interesting sort of critical strategy. Using my university words there. I still have some.
I think it's just sheer thoughtlessness, that's all. It's just it doesn't matter to people. Whereas, maybe them offending some, corporate higher-ups, they're very conscious and careful about, which actually is, part of the problem of the culture we're doing. Anyway, one has to be critical about those things, and one can't just say, oh, it was fun. Because, what was it fun about? Right? And kind of what kind of fun was it? And so on. I mean, kind of fun also is not an innocent thing. Films are stories about the world that we live in, right? So kind of what kind of stories they are, what they say about it, what desires they incite, or, kind of what ideal worlds they portend, those are all kind of why these films should matter, right? So, to then say, okay, this is why these films should matter, but actually it doesn't matter, to me at all because it cracked a few good jokes or whatever. It's just not good enough for me. Either... you deal with these films seriously or you don't. But then you can't claim they're great and then not deal with them seriously. So...
How much of that is personally aimed at me?
Quite a bit.
Never claimed greatness. But you're right. I probably am being as thoughtless as the filmmakers in not caring about the destruction, but it like I said, didn't feel egregious to me. It felt justified ain't the right word, but like the disrespect in a sense that you feel in Godzilla, is not saying that I felt here. It felt like an appropriate context for what was going on.
Oh God! Well, you see, I kind of. I don't feel that way. I mean, so for example, if you remember in the first Mission Impossible film, right? Like there's this whole beautiful use of Prague. Actually, it's one of the things that made me want to go to Prague, right? Because, it was so beautifully depicted on the film, and things like the Charles Street Bridge and the restaurants and so on were used as atmosphere and locale and a place for like romance and also for betrayal and, you know. And actually there was an explosion in a restaurant and, you know, it's not that kind of, there wasn't action or violence in it. But they didn't destroy Prague, right? You know, kind of action took place in Prague. This film kind of destroys entire areas of Prague, like without a thought, like without you know. I mean, you know, a filmmaking is an interactive thing. You have to think of how is the audience going to react to this being shown or this being done, or like kind of you're doing it for an audience. So to think that this destruction of like these 3 major capitals in Europe is of no consequence to an audience is to me a problem.
Yeah, it's there should be more context around it or significance attributed to it. I think, you know, to think about it in a more practical sense. What I was saying about the villain's ultimate goal being unclear, I think is kind of related to it. He wants to destroy these massive things and create this image of him saving the world from these massive things. And if his kind of ultimate goal made more sense to an audience, it would perhaps justify that more. And as it doesn't, I think you're left going, why did... This is meaningless. Kind of spectacle.
Yeah.
I think the film doesn't actually justify it within its own story.
And also, I think it's because of something. So, for example, you could imagine a film set in the Tower of London that could bring up all the history and excitement and use the atmosphere, you know, and so on, without actually kind of destroying the Tower of London, right?
Well, there's that scene in Black Panther where Killmonger goes to the British Museum and points out artifacts that have been stolen from his culture. That's I think a fairly reasonable equivalent of what you're talking about.
Well,
it's similar.
A little bit, you know. But do they destroy the British Museum?
They don't destroy it. They kill the kind of guards and people and then take the items.
And they take the items. So, you know, you can get suspense and action and so on. Yeah. But in this one, they bring the drones in, right? Like, you know, kind of, you know. I mean, come on. I just find that offensive. That's all, you know. That kind of, you don't think about how, you know, the destruction of something like the Tower of London or Tower Bridge or the Piazza San Marco or whatever, how that will affect audiences, you know. And, you know, fair enough to say that most audiences won't even know where the Piazza San Marco is, you know. But I think European audiences will. And it is, you know, troublesome.
Should we leave it here?
I think we better.
I have to go to work and watch Lord of the Rings 2. 3 fucking hours.
And I think I've ranted enough.
Yeah. Well, you know, luckily, I don't really care, so you haven't dampened my enthusiasm for the film, because I still enjoyed it.
I know you enjoyed it, but I'm hoping that, you know, kind of now that I've pointed out these things, you know, the enjoyment will sour in your mind and make you feel guilty about having enjoyed such
not
shit.
At all. not at all. Because it still to me came down to the character relationships and Peter Parker's personal story.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of what his responsibilities are and his relationship with Zendaya.
And, you know,
and I really, really loved
Hitler
that.
really loved that Eva Braun, you know, and kind of it was a little tough relationship with them.
Are you seriously?
It had a real human dimension.
Reductio ad Hitlering me.
I'm making kind of the comparison that you're making. That, you know, just because kind of human relations are human relations, kind of doesn't absolve anything else.
I'm not saying it absolves anything else. I just, you know, there were things I liked in it that you definitely didn't because you were going, oh, my buildings.
Oh, my buildings. What the buildings represent, you Philistine. Yeah. They survived for thousands of years. And no, let's just blow them out for like a stupid Spider-Man movie with no consequences expected.
I don't care. They were only buildings.
It's
not like Grenfell Tower, is it?
And you deserve.
Imagine if they destroyed Grenfell Tower in Spider-Man 4.
You deserve the world you get.
I'm saying, you know, let's combine both of our hates. I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm just saying, if you fuck Notre Dame, it doesn't matter. That's what I'm saying. That's the moral.
The thing is that it mattered, you know, to everyone all over the world.
No.
You know, and this film is kind of not acknowledging that these are symbolic sites, that they matter to people, and what they represent matters to people. And actually, these American barbarians are treating that as if it doesn't matter at all.
It doesn't matter.
It does.
It doesn't really.
You know, so those American barbarians are speaking to this English barbarian who is responding.
People matter. You know, the buildings get destroyed and no one dies because they're able to save the people. And that's what matters.
Well, that's not even true, because, you know, lots of people died and nobody gives a fuck.
You didn't see anyone die.
You saw lots of buildings falling over people.
You did, but again, the film has that wonderful strategic thing of, let's move them all out of the way.
Yes. None of the named people, none of the Americans died.
Yeah, none of the Americans died, but none of the Italians either. You didn't see any. You know, that's the whole thing. It's like it's a big sort of bloodless spectacle that is sort of safe for consumption by mass markets. I'm not saying it's perfect. Fuck me. But I'm saying, you know, if it's only just some fucking building.
It's a piece of kind of corporate fascist filmmaking, you know, that you're trying to kind of say it's okay because it has kind of two sweet teenagers awkwardly falling in love.
That's exactly right.
That's a good note to end on then. Thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, and on social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter. The website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com. And there you go.
Thank you very much for listening.
Leave us a comment, leave us a share or a like or a rating or all that sort of stuff. It really helps us out.
Yes.
You know, some people tell you that they listen.
I was in Bologna, and kind of several people told me that they listened to Eavesdropping, you know, and they were not friends of ours or indeed friends of ours.
No.
So that kind of,
that was
you know,
lovely. Yeah,
that was lovely.
That was really nice to know.
So do please kind of let us know if you're listening and what you think about your listening. Yeah.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.